It was a moonless night when Sarah decided to take a shortcut through the desolate countryside to reach her parents' house. She had been driving for hours, and fatigue was setting in. The road ahead was shrouded in darkness, illuminated only by the dim glow of her headlights. As she continued down the winding road, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It was as if the night itself was conspiring against her. The trees that lined the road seemed to stretch their gnarled branches towards her car, casting eerie shadows that danced in the periphery of her vision. Sarah's unease grew with every passing mile, and she couldn't help but glance nervously into her rearview mirror. She saw nothing but the empty road behind her, but an inexplicable sense of dread gnawed at her. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, emitting a burst of static before settling into an eerie melody. The song was unfamiliar, with haunting lyrics that seemed to tell a tale of lost souls and restless spirits. Sarah fumbled to turn it off, but the buttons on the radio were unresponsive. Panic welled up inside her as the haunting melody continued to play, filling the car with an oppressive atmosphere. Just then, she noticed a figure standing at the side of the road up ahead. It was a man, his back turned towards her, and he was dressed in tattered clothes. Sarah hesitated but ultimately decided to stop and offer assistance. She couldn't leave someone stranded on this desolate road, especially on such a dark night. As she approached the man, her headlights revealed his face. His features were contorted in an expression of pain and anguish, and his eyes were empty voids. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she realized that something was terribly wrong. She called out to him, but he didn't respond. Instead, he slowly turned to face her. The man's face was mangled and grotesque, as if it had been torn apart by some unspeakable force. His mouth opened wide, and a blood-curdling scream escaped his lips, sending a shiver down Sarah's spine. Without thinking, she slammed her foot on the gas pedal and sped away from the nightmarish figure. But the horror was far from over. The road seemed to stretch on endlessly, twisting and turning in unnatural ways. Sarah felt as if she were trapped in a never-ending labyrinth of darkness and despair. The radio continued to play its haunting tune, the volume rising to a deafening level. Then, in the distance, she saw them, countless pairs of glowing, malevolent eyes. They lined the sides of the road, watching her with an inscrutable hunger. Sarah's heart raced as the eyes drew closer, their unearthly glow casting an eerie pallor over everything. Desperation overcame her, and she floored the accelerator, determined to escape this nightmarish nightmare. The road seemed to warp and twist, defying the laws of physics. The radio blared louder, the song now a cacophony of dissonant notes that threatened to shatter her sanity. Just when she thought she couldn't take it any longer, Sarah's car burst through the darkness and onto a well-lit highway. The malevolent eyes and the haunting music disappeared, leaving her trembling and disoriented. Sarah eventually reached her parents' house, but she could never forget that night drive. She knew she had encountered something inexplicable and terrifying, something that defied all reason and logic. It was a nightmarish journey that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Title: The Midnight Highway. Part 1: The Invitation. It was a moonless night when Mark received an invitation from an old friend, Sarah, to visit her remote cabin deep in the woods. He hadn't seen Sarah in years, so he eagerly accepted the invitation, not knowing that this decision would lead to a nightmarish journey. Part 2: The Desolate Road. As Mark set out on the long drive, he found himself on a desolate highway, shrouded in darkness. Tall trees cast eerie shadows on the road, and the only source of light was his car's headlights. The road seemed to stretch endlessly into the abyss. Part 3: The Mysterious Hitchhiker. As Mark continued his journey, he noticed a figure up ahead, a hitchhiker. Despite a sense of unease, Mark couldn't ignore the person in need. He pulled over and offered a ride to the mysterious stranger. The hitchhiker was a woman named Emily, who seemed friendly enough, but her eyes held a haunting sadness. She claimed she was headed to the same cabin where Mark was going, a strange coincidence. Part 4: The Disappearing Road. As they drove deeper into the woods, the road grew narrower and more treacherous. Mark's GPS lost signal, leaving them entirely reliant on the car's headlights to guide them. Strange fog rolled in, making it nearly impossible to see beyond a few feet ahead. Part 5: The Cabin in the Woods. Eventually, they arrived at the cabin, an isolated structure surrounded by dense forest. Sarah greeted them with a welcoming smile, but Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Sarah explained that Emily was her cousin, though Mark had never heard of her before. Part 6: The Unearthly Noises. Inside the cabin, Mark noticed peculiar markings on the walls and a collection of old, cryptic books. When he asked about them, Sarah and Emily grew tense and evasive. As the night wore on, strange noises emanated from the surrounding woods, whispers, rustling leaves, and eerie chants. Part 7: The Revelation. Mark's unease turned into dread when he discovered the truth about the cabin. It was a place of ancient rituals and dark ceremonies, and Sarah and Emily were part of a sinister cult. Mark was trapped, unable to escape the clutches of the cultists. Part 8: The Escape. In a desperate bid for freedom, Mark made a run for it through the woods. He could hear the cultists chasing after him, their eerie chants echoing through the night. He stumbled upon an old, abandoned mine shaft and descended into its depths, hoping to hide. Part 9: The Conclusion. As Mark huddled in the darkness of the mine shaft, he heard the cultists searching for him above. Hours passed like a never-ending nightmare. Eventually, the cultists gave up their search, and Mark, exhausted and terrified, emerged from the mine shaft at dawn. Mark made his way back to civilization, forever scarred by the horrors he had witnessed. He realized that the night drive to the cabin had been a journey into the heart of darkness, one from which he would never fully recover.